People who walked out of a job interview, why did you do it? So I was informed about the evidently very strict building security prior to the interview. The front door was practically unmarked, and you had to swipe a card to get in, but there was no intercom. The elevator required a card as well, but the stairs didn't. However, no one informed me that the stairwells are locked from the outside, meaning I was locked in the stairwell with no way to get out. I called the recruiter over and over, and even called the front desk, but they just kept putting me on hold instead of sending someone to let me in at the correct floor. I ended up getting a call from the recruiter while still stuck in the stairwell, telling me they would not be going forward with the interview because I was late. I almost screamed, and asked her as calmly as I could manage if she had gotten any of the messages I left for her letting her know I was presently stuck in the stairwell with no way to get out. She said she hadn't, and it was too late anyway because they had gone with another candidate. She almost hung up on me before I could yell, "Then can someone please come free me from the stairwell so I can leave?" They sent security to get me, and I was treated like a criminal as I was led from the building. I have never been so confused, humiliated, and angry in my entire life. I left them a scathing review on Glassdoor. Well, you showed up looking for a job interview, you ended up being a prisoner. It was a commission-based sales job, selling kitchen knives. The interview pulled out a knife, and it fell apart in his hands. I'm also not a salesperson. I vaguely remember getting a very similar offer, like right when I was out of high school. I'm glad I didn't go with that. A pyramid scheme advertised as sales and marketing. It was a group interview, and they served wine for crying out loud. They had obvious stooges initiating conversation about how great this opportunity was. I got very drunk and stopped being polite about it. Man, next thing you know, they're gonna start sliding you roofies and getting you to sign contracts. Applied for a software developer position for an online retailer. First round of interviews was a traditional technical skills and whiteboard coding session. Second round was a cultural fit interview with HR. I assumed it would be a one-on-one interview with HR. It was a room with 20-something people applying for anything from legal to finance. They asked us to stand up, then crawl into a ball and pretend we were flowers opening. At this point, I honestly thought it was some kind of prank. Then I saw everyone around me doing it. I just said thanks for the opportunity and left. Alright, we got 20 contestants, but only one job opening, so let's see which of you is the most desperate for this job. I once showed up for a job interview in a suit and tie after answering a newspaper ad for a warehouse worker. Instead of a job interview at the warehouse, they had me get into some truck with one of the employees who drove me a few hours away, pulled over into some random neighborhood, and explained to me that the job was going door to door trying to sell cuts of meat to people, unsolicited. I told him this was not the warehouse worker job that they had advertised, and if he didn't bring me back home immediately, I was going to call the police and report a kidnapping. I was brought back to my car, but I was not paid for the several hours of my wasted time. Screw you, Pacific Prime of Cromwell, Connecticut. Why does anybody think that they can just get away with advertising a certain job and then completely switching it on them in the interview? Do they really think they're going to get any quality people that just go along with that? Slightly different, I actually interviewed and was hiring by a call center that focused on getting donations for a variety of non-profit organizations. I was desperate. It was on a Thursday, and I was told to show up the following Monday. When I showed up Monday morning, the entire business unit was completely empty. Stripped to the floor, wires hanging from the roof, empty. When I was there the week before, I saw around 20 to 25 cubicles of people all working diligently. A manager's desk at the far back, and waiting area chairs and tables, all in one large room. To this day I have no idea what happened. I just know they got out of there quick in 3 days' time. Well, they were probably trying to hide something. It's a shame you didn't get hired a week earlier. You could have joined in on their big escape. I showed up and the manager practically bragged about how the job offered no breaks for an 8 to 10 hour shift. And if there was a food break, it would be 5 minutes max, at a hip-height table with no chairs. She said that you'd be fired if you sat down even for 30 seconds. I'm more than capable of doing that. I did that every day at my last job. But when you brag about how your employees are so overworked that they don't get breaks or an option to rest their legs, it tells me all I need to know about how little you value your employees. I should also note that the job wasn't paying exceptionally well, above minimum wage, but not at a level that was even enough to live on. Well, I guess that's kind of an interesting way to try and sell a job, rather than being like, yeah, it's really terrible, it's gonna be really hard on you. They're just like, yeah, it's really hard, but we appreciate that. It builds character. I sat down with the owner, and the first thing he said was, I don't hire people with beards. I said, okay, got up and walked out. Yeah, I remember one similar where I went into an interview and I asked what the dress code was, and they're like, oh, it's business attire. And I just looked down and I'm like, well, looks like I failed. A jumped up security guard made me walk away before I even got in the building for an interview. I followed the instructions I was sent by the hiring manager, which was to park in the designated guest spaces. The security guard came charging out of the building yelling at me when I was barely out of the car about how I couldn't park there. Then when I raised my voice just to try and get him to listen, he started yelling at me for yelling at him. Eventually, when I got to tell him that I was told to park there, he called the hiring manager and started yelling at them about how I'd been yelling at him. Partway through that phone call, I thought, nah, screw this. I got back in the car and drove off. The hiring manager called me to apologize and asked if I'd come back. I politely declined, saying I wanted nothing to do with that security guard again. Dang it, Paul, if you scare away another one of our candidates, you're never going to be a security guard again. I was approached at work, a bagger for a major grocery store chain when I was 16, by a guy who asked me if I would be interested in making $1,100 a week. He told me to meet him at one of the empty businesses in the same plaza after work. He went on this long spiel about the Melaleuca tree from Australia, and how his company made soaps and shampoo out of it. Then he told me for $500 he would train me how to sell the products. I just turned and walked out the door with him yelling behind me that I would never amount to anything with my attitude. Oh, maybe this is what they're talking about whenever I see signs on the side of the road that's like, make $100,000 a year with no experience, just call this number. I didn't realize they're basically just trying to sell you a course teaching you how to do a job that you're never going to make any money from. I think my uncle called one of those numbers once, and he said, hey, I'd like to make $100,000 a year. And they said, oh, okay, what do you do for a living? And he's like, I'm an architect. And they're like, oh, no, this isn't a good position for you. And he's like, no, I want to learn, just teach me. And then they hung up on him. It's like, yeah, they could tell who's an easier prey than others. They spelled my name wrong on their internal documents, all the while emphasizing how important attention to detail was. On top of that, they kept asking me the same exact questions about 12 different ways, which the answer to it was clearly listed in my work experience on my resume. This was for a thermal engineering position. They offered a tour of the facility while the person I was to work under finished up a meeting. I declined and left. See, I know there's a lot of employers out there that think that everyone who's looking for a job is so desperate that it's like, oh, they'll be happy to take whatever we offer them so we can kind of screw them over a little bit. Or at least just like we don't have to put much effort into trying to impress them. So it's kind of weird whenever you see businesses that are just like, oh yeah, we really have nothing to offer. The owner of a bar told me in the first interview to never approach him with a problem because I wouldn't like how he fixed it. I'm not really sure what he's implying there. I once interviewed with the company of Innova here in Chicago for an engineering manager role. First part of the interview went well, then I met with a senior manager there, and he talked about the kind of crap they did. After a short time, it clicked with me. These dudes are loan sharks. I thanked him for his time and told him that I wasn't interested in screwing over poor people. I got up and walked out the door. No thanks, I'm not going to help payday lenders get more customers. Again, what does that position have anything to do with being an engineering manager? I had been told it was a marketing job. The first interview was about marketing and took place in an office. I got a call back and was very happy as it meant I'd be able to get out of the call center and do something I liked. I took my last day off I was allowed to go to the next interview, and when I got there they said they wanted me to go to the local Home Depot with them. I got there and found out it was an MLM. I was so stunned that I let them take me out of the floor and show off the aggressive sales technique they wanted me to use on random customers. I walked out crying because now I had no days off to interview, and I was ashamed to have been tricked by the first interview. Man, I had no idea it was just so common for people to just run into pyramid schemes when looking for jobs. It's like you just have to pray when going into a job interview, like, please be an actual job, please don't be another pyramid scheme. It was for a management position, running a mailroom, something I'd done twice before. All the standard questions were asked, and I felt like it was going well. Then he suddenly says to me, I'm hearing a lot of I from you. I'm concerned because we're about a team and not the individual here. What? It's a job interview and you're concerned that I'm answering questions you have asked specifically about me? With answers that address your questions about me? That's utterly nonsensical. I don't even remember how I responded, but I knew I didn't want to deal with this stupid semantic word and mind games, which I was sure I'd only seen the surface of, so I steered us right into concluding the interview, and I left. I also made a subtle show of taking back the copies of my resume that I brought with me. Yeah, I mean, sometimes all it takes is like one terrible person to make a job completely not worth taking. So you gotta be really careful when going into a job interview. Just make sure that you don't see any red flags. I should have. I stayed there out of morbid curiosity to see how low they would go. But I made the decision I wasn't gonna work there early in the process. I'm glad I stayed. The last thing that happened in the interview was the CEO personally asking all of us to promise that, if we ever make a mistake, the company will calculate how much that mistake cost us, and we will voluntarily pay the company that amount. So it sounds like they want you to be responsible like shareholders, but not get paid like shareholders. I showed up, and the woman at the front desk greeted me while I waited for the interview. I introduced myself and handed her my resume and waited. Once I got into the actual interview, I saw that she had taped a bright pink note to my resume that read, "Has the personality of a rock." How she determined that from our brief introductory exchange was beyond me at the time. The interviewer saw my facial expression when I saw the note. I thanked him for his time and left. I later found out that the woman at the front desk was the boss's wife. She had made it known that she didn't want young or thin or single women working in the office. Well, at least she was trying to say it in a nicer way, that she didn't like your personality rather than she didn't like the way that you looked, I guess. Not quite an interview, but when I finished university, I didn't have a sensible job to go to immediately. I went to a job agency and said I was looking for a temporary job for experience working in my chosen field. I didn't mind exactly what it was, or really how much it paid. We talked about my existing qualifications and experience. At the end of the interview, they said they had a perfect job for me. Someone will pick me up the following morning, and I said that I could drive. But no, they would pick me up. Fine. As I said, I didn't really care where it was or exactly what I was doing, as long as it met my, admittedly vague, requests, and they assured me that it was. The following day, a minibus came to get me. So where did they take me to work? A salad packing factory, to spend the day literally packing salad. I was getting paid, so what did it matter for one day? The worst was finding out over lunch was that if I had literally just turned up at the factory, they would have probably given me work. That is what happened for most of the staff there, who were largely seasonal workers from Eastern Europe. And those folks were also paid more than me. Not because I was new, but anybody who just turned up would likely get work and get paid more than I was. Obviously, they took us there by minibus, so we wouldn't just leave once we'd been tricked into going. So I did exactly that. I finished my lunch and then walked home. Oh man, I probably told this story before, but one time I went to a temp agency just looking for a job, and they sent me to work for this rental company that sets up for events. They told us to show up at 7, but nothing actually happens until 8, so there's 30 of us guys just standing around till 8. And then finally at 8 a.m. a bunch of the guys who drive the trucks show up. They each grab 6 or 7 guys, and then left over is me and 2 other people with who didn't get pulled for any jobs. And so they told us, oh, okay, just sweep the warehouse, and then I swept it and I never went back. I applied for a register position at Pizza Hut. I specifically told them during my 2 interviews that I cannot be a delivery driver due to my car being unreliable. They even acknowledged that and told me okay. I got the job, came in for a training on the first day. The very first thing they do is sit me down in a chair and started up a training video on delivery driving. I asked them if I could skip it since I'm only working the register and in the kitchen, and the manager tells me that every position is a delivery driver. I walked out right there and then and got paid for 1 hour of training. Man, it's almost insulting when you get that tiny little paycheck for $5 just because you showed up and was there and they legally have to pay you. But anytime I have to go out of my way to collect that check, I'm just just keep it. The ad said it was a salary position with benefits and holidays off. I showed up and it was 100% commission with crappy benefits and insane hours. I was I don't think we should continue with the interview. Good day. See, it's good when you're the type of person that will actually just tell them, no, I'm not doing this. Because I think a lot of times they do the bait and switch because there are too many people who are desperate and who are just too nice to say anything to actually just tell them off. Any job that says, you get what you put into it. You wouldn't want to limit yourself to just a 9 to 5, would you? Yes I would. 40-hour work week max, thanks. I want to do my job and get paid for my job. F off. Man, there's not a single job in this town. Yeah, unless you want to work 40 hours a week. I was looking for a job and was in an interview for a clothing store, CSR. Once they started talking about meeting sales goals, I told her politely that I didn't think it was a good fit and left. It was never mentioned in the ad or anything. I will never do a sales goal BS again, that's all. It is pretty demoralizing when you can't hit your goals and then because of that you must listen to the manager say, don't take no for a reason, or get 3 no's before accepting. No means no, dude. It's gross and I'll never do it again. Well, if you've made it this far into the video, I guess you haven't walked out quite yet. But that's all for our terrible job interviews. I guess I will see you again tomorrow.